For example number 9, we want to find a formula for the function f graphed in figure 17. So here is our graph. Now we have a graph that has 1, 2, 3 lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to have line 1, this is line 2, and we're going to call this one line 3. So if we take a look at the first line has a point here and then here. So let's call this the first one. So the first one has an ordered pair at 0, 0, and it has a point at 1, 1. Okay, so what can we determine from this particular line? Well, we see that it's crossing the y-axis. So therefore, this has a y-intercept at 0, 0. So we know that we have a y-intercept at 0. Now, can we determine the slope from this graph? Well, the slope goes up 1 and to the right 1. So that means the slope is going to be 1 over 1, which is equal to 1. Now, recall that we have the slope-intercept form. So the slope-intercept form is f of x, which is equal to mx plus b. So that means that this line, this first line, is f of x, which is equal to the slope, which is 1x plus 0. So this is f of x, which is equal to x. Now, we also need to determine that there is a restriction. So what is the restriction here? Meaning that how far does this line go to? Well, this line for x goes from 0 to 1. So if you look here, it goes from 0 to 1. So that means provided that x is in between 0 and 1. Okay, next we're going to look at line 2. So what do we know about line 2? Well, it has two ordered pairs. We have an ordered pair at 1 and then 1. And then we also have an ordered pair at, if this value is 2, so that means we have an ordered pair at 2, 0. So now this line doesn't cross the y-axis, but we can determine the slope. So what is the slope? The slope is equal to down 1 and then to the right 1, which is negative 1 over 1. So therefore the slope is negative 1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use one of those points and the slope using the point slope form to find the equation of that line number 2. So we have y, and we can choose either one of those points. So we're going to put minus 1, which is equal to negative 1, which is our slope, times x minus 1. So we're going to get y minus 1, which is equal to negative x plus 1. And if we add 1 to the other side, y is going to equal negative x plus 2. And writing this in terms of a function of x, f of x is going to equal negative x plus 2. Now, I want you to take a look at the domain here, or the restriction. Okay, now, we've already included the equals for this one. So we cannot let it be equal to 1. So that means that for f of x is equal to negative x plus 2, it's going to start at 1, but you can't include that 1. And then, you cannot include that 1, so it's going to be 1 less, so x is greater than 1, and then it's going to include the value of 2. So now let's take a look at line 3. So for line 3, we can see that this is a constant function. And that constant function tells us that we have a graph that's on the horizontal line. So that means that we have a slope of 0. And if we have a slope of 0, then that means if we wanted to solve for this equation using any point on that graph, and let's just pick this point here, which is 3, 0 on the line here of number 3. So if we use the point 3, 0 and then plug it into the form here, we have y minus 0, which is equal to 0 times x minus 3. Well, then we get y minus 0, which is 0, and therefore y is going to equal 0. So f of x is going to equal 0, and therefore that's our third equation. Now, what's happening here is that it's starting at 2, but we can't include 2 because we've included it in the second equation. So that means all the values of x have to be greater than 2 for that function. So now, if we want to then write this as a piecewise function, then that means we're going to have f of x Okay, we know that the first function is x, and we know that x is going to be in between 0 and 1 inclusive. And then we have negative x plus 2, or we can call this 2 minus x. So this is 2 minus x, with the restriction that x has to be in between 1 and 2, but it only including 2. And then we can also say that it's going to equal 0 for when x is greater than 2. So now this represents our piecewise function. So again, what you need to pay attention to is that, okay, if you're including 1 over here in this restriction, you cannot include it in the second one because of the fact that it's already included here. Likewise, with the 2, you cannot include it in set part 3 because you've included in part 2.